Do you know who the ancient Egyptian god of dreams is? His name is Tutu, and while you might hear it for the first time, you are definitely familiar with his image. Here is the original Sandman. Tutu was a powerful deity that lorded over many domains, including fate, fortune, and demons. While he was never explicitly named the god of dreams, he protected people against nightmares. Moreover, fate has always been interwoven with nightly dreams, so there is another strong connection in favor of this title. In fact, by examining Tutu's nature and domains, we can get a good idea of how Egyptians saw the dream world back then. For example, Tutu was often placed in front of tombs as a guardian. Keep in mind though that he was not only guarding the dead inside the tombs, but also the living from what could come from the beyond through the tombs. He was a protector from both bad dreams and demons. Does this mean the ancient Egyptians believed the spirit world and the dream world to be one? Religious texts such as the Book of the Dead make no such claims, but rituals and beliefs show a clear connection between the Egyptian divine world, the underworld, and the world of dreams. Tutu could protect worshippers first from the demons of the spirit world. Second, he could guard them against the death of the Egyptian afterlife. And third, he defended people from bad dreams. So the three realms are not one, but they are certainly connected in subtle ways. Moreover, myths and legends suggest that gods, heroes, and spirits of the dead could navigate them. This knowledge gives further nuances to the titles that Tutu bears. People call him "Who Comes to the One Calling Him" and "Of Beautiful Face." He was certainly representing a more benevolent aspect of dreams. Tutu's most popular shape, however, is what ties him the most to the realm of dreams. He was usually represented as a Sphinx, and the Sphinx has a far more ancient connection to dreams than the relatively young god Tutu. You see, Tutu's worship begins around 600 BC, and although this is 2600 years ago, the image of the Sphinx is much older than that. The most famous Sphinx statue is the Great Sphinx in Giza, guarding the entrance to the three pyramids. According to historians, the Great Sphinx was built between 2600 BC and 20 BC. That's almost 5000 years ago. And there are theories the statue might be much older than that, dating to 10,000 BC. Whatever the case, the Sphinx is a very old image. Historians believe that the statue represents the pharaoh Khephren, son of Khufu. That might be true, or it might not be true. The statue was claimed by several pharaohs and gods, so the truth is probably lost in the sands. We shouldn't focus on who the Sphinx was, but on what he represented. What matters to us is that even back then, the Sphinx guarded tombs. It guarded the underworld against what comes within and without. A guardian at the border of the conscious and unconscious worlds who had much to tell about dreams. Perhaps you know that back in the 1800s, most of the Sphinx was covered in sand and only the head was visible. It took more than a century and several efforts to finally free the Sphinx from his sandy prison. And archaeologists discovered an ancient stele between his paws. They name it the Dream Stele because it tells the story of a dream. The stele was created in the 1400s BC, and according to it, the Sphinx had been claimed by the Sands in those times too. Now that must have been a Russian Doll moment for the archaeologists translating the stele. It was sort of a dream within a dream, history repeating itself in the desert. The Sands claiming the Sphinx over and over again. According to it, young Thutmose, the son of the pharaoh, fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx. Back then, the Sphinx was considered to be the statue of god Horus of the horizon, or Hor-em-Akhet in Egyptian. So the Sphinx spoke to Thutmose in his dream and told him he would be the pharaoh of Egypt and protector of the gods' affairs. Afterward, Thutmose not only became the pharaoh of all of Egypt, but also created a new cult that worshipped the Sphinx. Perhaps the cult of Tutu is a descendant of that earlier cult, or perhaps both these cults follow in the steps of something much more ancient and authentic. Historical interpretations aside, the dream stele adds a new chapter to the legend of the Sphinx, a mythical creature and a god that communicates through dreams and brings wisdom from beneath the sands. The ancient Greeks have their own spin on the legend of the Sphinx that further ties it to the world of dreams. According to them, the Sphinx came from Ethiopia, not Egypt. Perhaps they possessed information that is lost to us nowadays. Perhaps that's where the original Sphinx came from. Nonetheless, the Greek Sphinx was of monstrous origins. It was the offspring of Typhon and Echidna, and its siblings were legendary monstrous guardians such as Cerberus, the three-headed dog of Hades. Moreover, the Greek Sphinx is a key character in one of the greatest ancient tragedies, that of King Oedipus. Oedipus was the son of King Laius and Queen Jocasta, the rulers of the Greek city of Thebes. King Laius consulted the Delphian oracle of Apollo, and he was given a prophecy that his son will kill his father and marry his mother. Remember how Tutu was a god of fate among other things? Destiny and prophecy always go hand in hand, and you see the Sphinx has a key part to play in this prophecy. Just have a little patience. Needless to say, the king wasn't ecstatic about such omens, and he gave his newborn son to a servant who was supposed to dispose of him permanently. And as we know from countless fairy tales and legends, the murder of an innocent is the only thing you don't delegate to your henchman. Naturally, the servant gave the child to a shepherd, who gave it to another shepherd, who gave it to King Polybus and Queen Merope, the rulers of Corinth. And they raised him as their own, and they lived happily ever after. Until a drunk guy told him he was adopted. Oedipus asked his adoptive parents whether it was true, and they lied to him straight to his face. It seems to lie was a familiar pattern of theirs, because Oedipus didn't trust them and went to the Delphian oracle. And he was told that he will kill his father and marry his mother. When he heard this, Oedipus decided he will never go back to Corinth to keep his parents safe. He made the same mistake his birth father had done. He tried to evade a prophecy, and this is usually the best way to fulfill one. So Oedipus headed for Thebes, and on the road there, a guy tried to run him over with his chariot. Oedipus killed him in response, not knowing this was his birth father, King Laius. He continued on his way to Thebes, and on the road he met none other but the Sphinx. It was terrorizing the region. Actually, maybe it is more accurate to say she was terrorizing the region, because the Greek Sphinx is female. She guided the road to Thebes, and she would ask travelers a riddle, and whoever answered the riddle would pass, but whoever failed to answer correctly would be strangled. Now, as expected, nobody had answered the riddle so far, and a lot of people had been strangled. That's actually what the word Sphinx means, a strangler. And if you ever suffer from sleep apnea and night terrors, you might find this a perfect name for a malevolent god of dreams. The Sphinx asked Oedipus what creature had 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening. That's the riddle Oedipus got, and I had the feeling the rest of the travelers had something else entirely. Now Oedipus knew the answer to this riddle because he had heard it in a dream. Remember how Tutu had power over dreams? So Oedipus gave the right answer, and the Sphinx jumped from the mountain into the sea, presumably to find her doom there. But keep in mind that the green Sphinx has wings, and a jump would hardly be fatal. So Oedipus reached Corinth, and it turns out the Sphinx has been terrorizing them, and the queen has promised to marry whoever rids them of the menace. And this is how Oedipus married his mom. All this would be impossible without the intervention of the Sphinx. It created the right conditions for all this to happen. Without the Sphinx, who knows how things would have ended. So here are a few parallels between the Sphinx and dreams. They speak in riddles and they're agents of fate. However, the Sphinx in this case is a malevolent force that masterminds terrible events. It's very much like an unconscious behavior that's driving a person towards a bad self-fulfilling prophecy. So if the Egyptian Sphinx is the carrot, the Greek version would be the nastiest stick imaginable. On a side note, it's no surprise that Sigmund Freud drew inspiration from this myth and defined the Oedipus complex as a thing in his book, The Interpretation of Dreams. Greek mythology is an excellent source of inspiration for all sorts of maladies. The Greek interpretation of the Sphinx calls for another relevant question. Why is there no explicit god of dreams in ancient Egypt? After all, the Greeks had several gods that personified dreams. Well, Egyptian mythology is very different in this regard. It does not aim to explain and rationalize to begin with. The Egyptians were big on mystery and leaving things unsaid, for not all things are subject to words. That's why the Sphinx remains mysterious, majestic, and menacing, much like dreams can be. In the end, I can give you a free piece of advice. If you ever dream of the Sphinx, pay attention to whether the head is male or female. If it is male, it's probably a good omen. However, if it is female, tell us all about it in the comments. And if you like this video, you might consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. It will show the algorithm that the world wants more stories about dreams.